Get ready, X-Men fans. With the mutants making their epic return to the big screen, we're taking a look at which characters could steal the spotlight in the MCU. Stick around to find out which X-Men we think are primed to become the world's new favorite heroes. So we're going to break this down into a couple categories here. We're going to have 2 X-Men each that we think definitely need to get brought into the MCU. And then we're going to have a shared contender that we think needs to sit on the bench for a little bit. So without any further ado, Dakota, why don't you get into your X-Men that you think got to come to the MCU?
All right. So I think the X-Men are one of my favorite teams. So there's really not too many wrong answers here, but I think for me, one that has always been a favorite and that I think would do well in the movies would be Nightcrawler. We've seen him sort of in the First Class stuff. I think his best portrayal or people's favorite was in X2. I'm still looking for a little bit more of that like circus acrobat, sword swinging Nightcrawler now that we're kind of a little bit farther ahead, because he was good in X2 and that was quite a while ago. I think we've got the abilities, the CGI, stuff like that we could do a good looking Nightcrawler. You could show the portal teleporting effects. It could work. I think it would also be cool to bring in like the religious aspects. I'm not saying we go full on like Daredevil, where every issue it seems like he's like Catholic guilt. But I think it would be kind of fun to kind of explore those different like aspects of his religion, because I think they've done that well in comics where, you know, you're going up against things like Thanos or Kang or whatever it is, like big cosmic threats. And you're kind of like this isn't really what I was reading about in the Bible. Like there's beings in this universe that are essentially godlike. Right. So I think that could be a really cool like aspect of the character. Yeah. And he's also like super close friends with a lot of folks, like Wolverine's best friend, like family to Rogue, a lot of different ties there. So I think he'd be super fun.
Yeah, I think 97 definitely showed us how much cool stuff you could do with fight scenes with Nightcrawler just visually. I did love that scene with him and Wolverine just going to town. So I think there's a lot of, even just visually, ways to spice up fight scenes and with the effects. I'm going to have to ask Dakota, is he going to come with his swords, though?
100%. He's got to just, from day one, he's swinging those swords. He's got 3 of them, holding one in each hand and one in the tail. I think, like you said, when he came in to X-Men 97, when they started taking out those Sentinels and he was sword fight, that was perfect. I mean, it also works out so well that, you know, you throw in some Sentinel robots, slice and dice them, it doesn't matter. It's
goes to town.
Right. So
yeah,
for sure.
And I think definitely like the comedic relief and like the levity, not even the comedic, because he's not like always like cracking one-liners, but like he just kind of has a demeanor that can bring some lightness to the team and lean into that comic book vibe. So I totally agree.
His personality is like acrobatic too, where like you said, it's not like he's like Deadpool, Spider-Man cracking jokes,
right?
But he does kind of seem to have that like smile on his face, like happy most of the time, but he can get serious if he needs to.
Yeah.
So that's my first one. My second one is going to be Kitty Pryde. And kind of like we've talked about before, I think Kitty Pryde should be kind of the central character for the X-Men. So bringing her in as young Kitty Pryde, she's like brand new on the team. Maybe it's kind of an established team, but you know, she's the one who's kind of like we meet the X-Men through her eyes. I think that would be really cool. And then as time goes on, like, you know, if we have something similar to what the MCU is now, it's been going on over 10 years. We see Kitty Pryde over those 10 years for the X-Men's MCU. She can grow into more of the leader of the X team, whether that's, you know, starting a separate team or just kind of the mainline X-Men movie. We eventually see her in that leadership role, because I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah. I think Kitty is definitely a character. Obviously, like you said, started in the comics as more like the young teen newbie, and then had evolved into more of like the leader, senior X-Men member, really. Yeah. And I think she never really, I mean, I guess we had her in X3, but that to me wasn't really like giving Kitty Pryde her dues as far as a major player on the X-Men team.
Yeah. And I think with her, like, I'd never saw her as like a serious X-Men before, just because I was like, you know, she can phase through things and how helpful is that? But I think they've done a really good job in the comics of like building the character up to be somebody that's more than their powers, but also can use that maybe somewhat of a simple power and make it effective.
We could lean into the like whole training with Wolverine ninja stuff too, which has never really been touched on. So yeah, I think a lot of people would love to see a more comic book accurate interpretation of Kitty being more of a real contributor to the team. So
yeah,
I could totally see that.
So that's my two that I think for sure should be in the X-Men, and one that we kind of agree that, you know, maybe don't leave them out entirely, but they should be taken kind of taken a seat for a little bit because we need to let some of the X-Men shine without Wolverine. I think in both comics and all visual media, we've seen a lot of Wolverine, whether that's the movies. I mean, and don't get me wrong, I love Hugh Jackman as much as the next guy.
Probably more, actually.
You know, probably. But I think it would be fun to see a buildup of these other characters, because I've kind of thought about this of like, if the characters in the original X-Men animated series hadn't been a part of it, would those characters be as popular as they are today? Like if they had used any other random, like if the main core team would have been like Bishop, Nightcrawler, Kitty, Colossus, characters like that, would those be the ones that we think of today as the main team? And I think that helped Wolverine get super popular. And then when we see him in the like original X-Men movies with Hugh Jackman, and now we just see like Wolverine's in every comic,
like the central character to the whole team. Where really, if you look back in the older books, like he's cool, but he's not like the guy that like everybody, like everything revolves around him. Which I agree with you. I think he works better as he's kind of more like the loner outcast type. Like he's there, but then kind of not. But yeah, I think agree with that.
He still has his place, like you said. Even with my Kitty Pryde, it would be awesome to have that relationship between those two, where he trains her, and you know, you've got that ninja aspect. But I don't want that to be right off the bat. I think we let him rest for a few years, really build up the universe. And then I think that also just makes it that much sweeter when you see that character that I mean, everybody still knows Wolverine, whether he's in the movies or not. So then when he comes in, you're like,
they're not going to forget about him.
Right. Exactly. So then when you see him, it's something that's a little bit more exciting versus just like, oh, here, movie one, we're still following Wolverine like we always have.
Yeah. Maybe makes him a little more special too when he does show up, and like you've built the anticipation instead of like, oh, it's Wolverine. Hey man, you know, you're more like, oh dude, Wolverine, he's back, and we're doing whatever they're going to do with him. So I definitely think we need to shift gears, and I think that would kind of challenge the writers too, to be like, how do we build up some of these characters that maybe haven't been spotlighted as much as they could be.
Right.
I'd agree. Speaking of characters that haven't been spotlighted, Dakota, I'm going to segue into my two picks. First one, a little bit out of the box maybe, and I'm going to throw out Darwin. Now I know before in a video, I think we talked about our dream X-Men characters, which you can go check out on a team. But I've always liked the character of Darwin. I think very fascinating idea of the power, just literally adapting or evolving to survive. So I think kind of naturally fits well with the theme of X-Men. I know he had that small role in First Class, but to me felt a little underutilized because I think there's kind of endless potential you could do with that character, both visually but also thematically. And I think he'd be a cool one to introduce as some of those like recent X-Men. I don't know, he's probably 20 plus years old now. But you know what I mean? Like some of these characters that you don't think of right away as X-Men, but maybe kind of what the MCU did was take some of the heroes that are less well known and like elevate them to like, oh, that's actually really cool. And you'd probably have to expand them, give them more of a backstory and do other stuff with them. But I think he could add a lot to a new version of the team. Yeah.
And so if you're bringing him into this movie, is he going to look, is he going to start out more human-y? Is he going to look a little more like he does in comics where he's a little more, I don't know, alien fish like?
I'd love to have him be kind of that gray alien looking guy with a weirdo head. I think would be my preferred look. for him. So that'd be my pick. And I think we could go a lot of directions with that. Second one, a little more classic, but you know, and I know, Dakota, the Beast is going to have to make his a prominent return here. Now, again, I know we got Beast in X3. We had him in the First Class movies, but I really want that comic booky Beast. He's going to be in his blue undies, Dakota. That's a non-negotiable for me. I think we'd have to go full CG at this point. I think we're past the days of guy in a fursuit.
Yep.
And again, X3, it was kind of like the senior retired member. And then you had him in First Class, was more like, to me, felt kind of like that younger, kind of like a teen Beast, but you know, he was kind of in that grouping. So I like Beast. He's sort of the senior member. He feels like almost like Professor X's like friend in a way, where he's like helping him out. He's doing the tech, the science, all that, but still able to interact with the team. So I'd see him more as like the mentor, facilitator.
Yeah.
Gives him some cool science elements, but he's going to have some cool fight scenes too, where he's going to town.
Yeah. I would like to see Beast, and like you said, I think the X3 version was kind of a good like retired Beast. I mean, he's like retired from the X-Men. You know, he's you know, trying to make change at like the law level, but I think having kind of that Beast, like you said, a little bit bigger. And then still, he's got to be quoting some philosophy, quoting some poetry, which I guess that X3 Beast did some, but I just think
I think him being on the team, like you said, would be a bigger component of like he's actively there.
Right.
Would be cool, I think.
I agree. It's a good pick.
Well, thank you. So that is what we've got for our 2 X-Men each and one that's got to sit on the bench. You can let us know in the comments below, of course. What do you think? Do you agree? Which X-Men would you like to see? Who needs to sit out? You can go ahead and go back and watch some previous videos. One was how we would do the X-Men in the MCU. Some fascinating ideas, if I don't mind saying. We also have an X-Men ranking of our X-Men ranking in a tiered list, which you can go ahead and check that one out as well, if you would like. So please be liking, sharing, and subscribing. And until next time, as always, stay strong.